So welcome again to Cherry Red TV. My name is Ian McNay and I'm with John Reed, who's our Director of Catalogue.
Hello.
And we're going to talk about the box sets which you've been putting together for many years. And in particular, this one is New Moods in the Sky, the British progressive pop sounds of 1970. And this is part of a series, John. Do you want to just run us through what the series is all about?
Yeah, so we have this label Grapefruit, which is overseen by David Wells, who's an old friend of mine and an expert on British late 60s psychedelia. And as with many of the box sets, we came to this series as a sort of happy accident of kind of mopping up stray tracks that we had in the catalogue, odd things that we knew about. How can we kind of bring all these tracks together? So we did, previously we've released 3 CD box sets dedicated to music of a psychedelic persuasion, shall we say, from 1967, 1968 and 1969. And they've been amongst our best sellers on the label. And they tend to combine a few big hitters, name artists, The Pretty Things, Procol Harum, Crazy World of Arthur Brown, with really obscure tracks of the kind that David Wells has reissued on his 10th Planet label previously, and a smattering of unissued tracks. So this box set's interesting, New Moons in the Sky, because really we couldn't really pretend that the psychedelic scene continued into 1970, but we felt there was enough demand to keep the idea going, keep the story going. So we've come up with this idea of British progressive pop. And 1970s intriguing because it found British pop at a crossroads. So obviously it's crossroads in terms of a new decade, but also the music scene had become quite diversified and fragmented. On the one hand, it's now all about a post-Woodstock Isle of Wight world where Led Zeppelin and the big rock bands, Black Sabbath, Deep Purple prevail, and the disparity between those groups and pop music has never been greater. Since '67, really, with Sgt. Pepper, pop has fragmented between the sort of more serious end of rock and the more frivolous end of pop. And what this box set sort of tries to do is bring those back together. So you have artists like the Tremolos rubbing shoulders with the Procol Harums and the more serious rock bands. So it's kind of finding, it's like if psychedelia had continued, this is what it would have been. So it's an interesting, trying to chart uncharted territory, really.
And you've got quite a few obscure bands here that I expect you hadn't even heard of before you started researching.
Absolutely.
And this process of discovery always interests me. So you start with a theme, and how do you find all these almost unknowns or comparative unknowns?
Well, in this instance, David previously has written, tens of thousands of words about that era. He's a collector himself, he's also been a record dealer, and he's had his own reissue label. So he is intimately familiar with tracks that it might even have just got to acetate stage at the time, or things that are bubbled up on almost privately pressed records either at the time or subsequently have come out in limited runs for the real niche underground collectors scene. So, and even then, sometimes when we contact bands, small labels, they'll suddenly say, oh yeah, and we've got this unissued track. So it's just a case of sort of using the network of people, and with social media and such like now, it's a lot easier to find people if you haven't had any contact with them before. So it is possible to kind of reach out to these folks, as well as licensing tracks from the majors and independent labels. So you kind of, it's the whole, you run the gamut, different sources really.
And this is always the theme with the box sets, isn't it? To have some well-known names, may not always be the obvious tracks by the well-known names, and combine them with people that are not well-known at all. And somehow, as you said earlier on, it kind of works, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I think this box set's interesting because, you've got Barclay James Harvest, Hawkwind, Atomic Rooster, Curved Air. These are acts that are synonymous with a heavier, more serious, progressive end of things. Rubbing shoulders, like I say, with Honey Bus, the Marmalade and the Tremolos, who are more at the poppier end of the spectrum. So I think the idea with this is to sort of, start with this one especially, not just capitalise on a scene that's already there that collectors are fascinated by, but almost present them with something a bit new, a bit different, what was 1970s, a fresh face, really. Yeah.
And has any band reformed because they've been in this box set? I know that happens occasionally, that bands that kind of broke up so many years ago come back to life, even if it's just for
I've not heard of anyone
time.
from these box sets. We did, when we did Scared to Get Happy in 2013, which was the 80s indie pop, the Brilliant Corners came back together, especially for the gig that we did around that. So it does happen. It certainly rejuvenates interest. There's one interesting track I wanted to highlight, which is new to CD, which was really intriguing cover of The Small Faces' My Mind's Eye by a group called Canticle, which was produced by Peter Eden, who was the guy who sort of discovered Bill Fay originally.
Peter Eden had his studio, didn't he?
That's right, yeah.
Yes.
So we represent some of his rights. And this single he produced, I think in 1970 obviously, only came out in Canada. And we've never found a usage for it, but it's a great sort of folk rock version of a Small Faces song, and we've managed to find a usage for it here, so really pleased with that.
And this is what we do at Cherry Red, don't we? Especially with all the tracks that we own and the publishing we have, we're always trawling through the list to see what is there that appears to be dormant that we can help bring back to life. We love doing that, bringing things back to life.
Yeah, and being quite playful. I mean, this box set ends with a Bill Oddie single, which was for John Peel's Dandelion label, which was a serious label, but he was obviously friends with Bill, and Bill did this kind of offbeat, quirky novelty single, but it just fitted, so we put the last track is Bill Oddie. So yeah, not being too pompous or taking it too seriously. Equally, we do take it very seriously because we're all passionate about the music, so it's trying, again, finding the right balance really.
And I guess this is the last one in this series, is it?
Well, it's a bit like, yes, if it sells really well, see you next year for 1971.
Yeah.
I mean, ultimately, if people want to buy them, we'll continue to deliver them because they're always great fun to do. So.
Yeah, great. All right. Thanks very much, John.
Thank you.